Good morning, everybody. My name is Miriam Glaze. I'm the founder of Athlete Soul. Welcome to our Tuesday educational webinar. We have here Betsy Cutler and Geoff Cushner that will be talking to you about mental health as well as the athlete's mental health link. Before we get into it, and as people come into this webinar, I want to give you a little bit of information, housekeeping information, as we do every time. First of all, this event is being recorded. We will be sharing the information with you following the event, both the recording of the event as well as the contact for our guests if you want to reach out. You can also find more information about other events that we have going on a regular basis on our website. It's athletesoul.space/events. And then at this point, I'm going to pass it to Betsy. I want to thank you, Betsy and Geoff, for joining us today. It's really an honor and a pleasure to have you. I can't tell you how much I love your app and the work that you're doing. So I'm really excited that we have this opportunity to highlight what you guys do. And we'll talk a little bit more about this at the end. I'll pass it on to you, but thank you again.
Well, thank you, Miriam, for having both myself and Geoff. We are very thankful at the opportunity to bring this educational, foundational mental health webinar to not just Athlete Soul, but to any of the coaches and teams and athletes that are affiliated with you. So we are thankful for that ourselves, and we are happy to be here. The purpose of what we've created for everybody is to provide educational info on what is mental health, the basics of what is mental health, and what is mental well-being overall, and how they work together. We also are going to be integrating the Athlete Mental Health Link mobile app that you see at the bottom here. We're going to be putting graphics in as it is related to the slides that we have created. Then at the end of the presentation, we'll go through downloading it and how people can download it and other specific pieces of the app and how it can be supporting to not just athletes and coaches, but also to teams and to other organizations. So you'll see little pictures of it through it here and there, along with all of the details that we're going to be giving and all the educational stuff we're going to be bringing to you all today. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get started. What is overall athlete mental well-being? Geoff and I have comprised 4 different major components that add up and support overall mental well-being. Our first one is athletic performance. So athletic performance has 2 elements. Our first element is specific sport training. So this is your physiological, it's your kinesiology, it's the mechanics of your sport. It is, I have a really good friend that is a pro golfer. He's heading down to the RBC today. He will spend 5 hours a week on the actual putting stroke of, say, let's see, putts within 5 feet. And he will do the mechanics of getting the ball into the hole within 5 feet with the hopes of, say, increasing his percentage to, say, 65 or 70% of making that putt. Let's say that you're Miriam and you're an Olympic swimmer, and perhaps your stroke is butterfly. Maybe you are going to be trying to tighten your stroke so that you can take that 1/10 of a second off to increase and to actually decrease your time, let's say for the 50 meters. So this is what you are doing specifically, physically, mechanically to make you better at your craft, at your sport. The second piece of athletic performance, I think, creates a lot of confusion. So we're looking at sport performance psychology. there are two things we need to make sure that we are delineating. The first thing is clinical psychology or clinical interventions, like Geoff is a clinician, versus sport performance psychology. And sport performance specifically, is mental skills and techniques that are incorporated into your behavioral and mental techniques as you are doing your sport. So if we think of athletic performance as the physical portion, and the mental skills and techniques from a sport performance perspective is the mental and behavioral pieces to make you better at your craft, at your sport. Now, that being said, there is an additional portion of mental skills and techniques that are somewhat related to athletics, but also related to just being overall better mentally well. And I will circle back to that at the end, right before we introduce the app in its full complexity. The third component of overall mental well-being is physical health. And as it pertains to an athlete, we're talking your workouts, your endurance workout, your strength workouts. We're talking your nutrition. We're talking your sleep. We're talking all those things that contribute to you being physically healthy. Now, the fourth major component of your overall mental well-being is this thing that we call mental health. So all four of these components, as well as the elements within those components, help make up our overall mental well-being. And as it pertains to athletes, all of these pieces fold in together to create a balanced overall mental well-being for our athletes. So I've gone over athletic performance, physical performance, and just slightly touched base on mental skills and techniques. We're going to head now into the mental health portion, and Geoff is going to pick us up from there.
Right. Thank you, Betsy, and I'm glad to speak to everybody today. As a clinician, as a person who's in charge of a group practice, this is what I do all the time. Also teach us on a graduate level. And in working with athletes who I see in my practice as recently as last night, there is this piece of, mental health that we always, are addressing. People are coming to me saying, might be looking for help, or maybe people close to them are looking for help for them. And so we're going to talk, about what that means. So when we say mental health, that means really three things to make it really simple. So first, it has to do with how we think. Second has to do with how we feel. And the third is how we behave. So in the grand scheme of how I do my work, we use a broad-based theory a lot of practitioners call cognitive behavioral therapy, which has to do with how our thoughts, feelings, and actions all interrelate. And if one of them is off base, then we know we're off base. Also, there's a fourth piece, which is our physiological piece, which is our body. Now, we know how that can impact us as we are as athletes. In gaining greater control of our body from a mental health standpoint is also crucial. So, let's go back to here. We've identified what mental health is. Now, sometimes we can't see what mental health is because we can't see it. Now, we see physical health, we see an injury. Somebody breaks a bone, we can definitely tell someone has a definite injury. Their walk is different. They may not be able to get up on their feet. They may need to be taken off, on a stretcher. And so that's easy to see what physical health is about. And when those needs come up, mental health, we know we can cover those injuries, those mental injuries, for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about later. There are times where as athletes, though, we may not want to seek this kind of help for mental health because, we're the superior being. So we use negative behaviors to push away those people who are trying to help us. We may not always, trust those authority figures for a variety of reasons, from where we grew up to, here we are again as superior athletes. We believe that we can do this by ourselves. So we do push those people away. Now let's talk about what it means to be an athlete in terms of growing up. Now, athletes, we can identify, or people can identify with who we are based on our performance as early as 4, 5, 6 years old, maybe even earlier. So people in the community, in our school, in our organizations, look at us and say, you're a superior athlete. You're a great soccer player, a great swimmer. Look at Tiger Woods when he was, 3 years old on TV. He was a great golfer, even at that age. And so this is what we see. And, that those athletes, and being propped up in the community, they don't want to be seen as weak. Who wants to be seen as weak? So as athletes, we want to see as we're strong and that we don't have any inadequacies, especially with mental health. Because what does that mean? People look and say, wow, there must be something wrong with you. It's not what it means, but that's has been the common thought for so long. And so that's really important to understand. I'll let Betsy talk more about this in a moment, but, athletes don't want to risk, losing what they have. Here we are. If you're a great, athlete in youth sports, high school varsity, you gain scholarships. What does that mean? Betsy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I have done collegiate athlete perceptions research. It is actually going to be published this week online in the Journal for Intercollegiate Issues on Athletics. My research specifically looked at collegiate athletes and their perceptions of seeking mental health help. And a couple of the very interesting, very first issues that came to realization was that our athletes, especially, as Geoff mentioned, for losing scholarships, our freshmen specifically are really fearful of acknowledging that they may need mental health supports because they are fearful of not just being redshirted or losing playing time or never having playing time at all. They are fearful of, in general, losing their scholarship, which for them and their families oftentimes provide an actual college education and a possibility to move out into further opportunities out in life. The second piece of our research that goes along with this about losing scholarships is that athletes do not want to tell their coaches that they could be struggling with mental health issues because our athletes' perceptions of coaches is that they are not going to support them in seeking mental health help. What my research showed is that the further resources were away from the actual team, the more likely our athletes were going to ask and seek help. Another barrier for seeking mental health help is that athletes may bring preconceived ideas about seeking help that may be related to their faith, may be related to their culture, or a community belief system. And another barrier that we actually talked about in numerous research, and I have a good friend of mine at Ball State that has done research on this, it's their lack of experience and or education in dealing with pressures, depression, suicide, and risk. That is why what Geoff and I are doing and bringing to you all is so important. This is the foundational, educational mental health module that every athlete and every coach needs to see. This is going to be the prompt to give them the education and the information and the foundational stuff that they can utilize going forward. There is no way 18, 19, 20, or even 30-year-olds can remember all of this information. But if we can put it in a package that makes it easy for you all to see, read, hear, feel, and touch, as well as access through the app, then you are going to have at your fingertips the availability of all of this basic information to take with you wherever you are. So this is a great platform and very informational that we can utilize to educate our coaches as well as our athletes on the basics of mental health. What we see down here is the first representation from the Athlete Mental Health Link app. We have common signs in there. We have more than 15 lists of common signs. And I wanted to highlight, other than just depression and suicide risk, which are two of the biggest ones in all of our athletes, the other two biggest issues is the number one clicked on common sign is aggression, which I think is very interesting for our athletes. And the second most common issue that athletes deal with is obsessive compulsive disorder. And it's probably not hard to understand that when most of our elite athletes, and I don't care if you're high school, college, or an Olympian, our elite athletes are perfectionistic. It's what makes them elite. So with this information embedded in there, this is another way that we can continue breaking down those education or lack of education barriers.
So, you know, we've talked about some of the challenges. We're going to talk now about trauma, because trauma is a component that can affect our mental health. Believe it or not, our past can help us. Our past can also challenge us. So let's talk about what we know about physical trauma, what it looks like. But don't always, you know what that emotional trauma looks like. You can see the physical, the emotional, what's left with us. So trauma can be a single event, or it can be, multiple. It could have complex PTSD. So with a single event, it could be a house fire, it could be a car accident, it could be a robbery, that can debilitate us. Complex PTSD is something that happens over and over again. So let's say, even as superior athletes, we grow up in homes where the homes haven't always been predictable and reliable for us. Parents maybe who've struggled with substance abuse, maybe there's been violence in the home, maybe food insecurity. And so those things still haunt us, even in our sport of, of how we're going to function, and they may bring back unwanted memories if not addressed well. So trauma is critically important that we address it. Now, let me just show you very briefly. I'm going to try and keep it as basic as possible. And I love this chart because it's very easy to see. Now, what we want in our daily functioning is a normal range of reaction, so that, there are times where we're activated, we're aroused, it allows us to act and to use energy in a proper manner, and then we can calm ourselves and settle our emotions. That's what it means to be in a normal range. The bottom half of this chart talks about with trauma, the symptoms of undischarged traumatic stress. So when we've dealt with trauma that hasn't been addressed, it's as if we have our on switch and it's stuck on, or it's stuck off. So if it's stuck off, that's when we have feelings of depression. So we have feelings of depression such as exhaustion, chronic fatigue. We may have issues with pain or poor digestion because our body isn't functioning to the capacity it should. Or it's stuck on, where we have periods of anxiety, panic, hyperactivity. There could be an inability to relax. So we want to definitely in our sport channel our energy, but we also want to then calm ourselves. We're not able to do that. There's restlessness, there's digestive problems because our inside of our stomach, we have this feeling. It just feels like a sick stomach feeling because there's this feeling of stress that happens over and over again. There could be, again, chronic pain and sleeplessness, as well as this hostility and rage that we feel like we just can't turn off. Maybe, again, we grew up and there was violence in the home. Well, we feel like whether it's conscious or unconscious, we want to react to our own histories. We feel like this is an okay behavior to be doing. Without being corrected or addressed, it will be left unchecked, and that could be dangerous. So here again, our trauma can affect us in all forms of life. It can affect us getting jobs, keeping jobs, being successful. If we're going to school and we haven't addressed our issues, they will affect us in our collegiate careers. How about our relationships? How are we able to keep good relationships if we're not even sure what it means to have healthy relationships, because that's what we saw in our childhood. What studies also show, unfortunately, is that there's increased rates of incarceration because we really have grown up with one way of being, one way of living, and that's with trauma. If we recreate that traumatic life, we risk ourselves being in trouble with staying in the community. So that is why help is needed. What also is a risk for us, not left unchecked, by a mental health professional, is what if we have a major injury? We've been playing, we've been at our peak in our sport, and we have this injury, or we're demoted. We used to start, now we're on the bench. There's pressures by the coach. We know certain coaches are easier to deal with than others in pushing us. We know certain parents are the same way. So these push us. Social media. We're here in the day and age of social media where Instagram and Twitter, it's right in our face. People have some really strong opinions, and they're not always correct, but we definitely take these things personally. Our peers may say things. And so all these factors play a part in increasing our mental stress. And as Betsy had mentioned earlier, who's helping us? Who's preparing us when we're growing up to deal with these level of stresses as athletes on this pedestal, trying to perform at such a high level, and it feels like people are cutting us down at every point. So getting support is important. Unfortunately, though, studies show that college athletes participate in counseling at 1/3 the rate of the non-athlete. There's a lot of reasons for that, and that tends to be because of stigma. As an athlete, who wants to be seen walking in, the front of the health center or the counseling center's door? Because all the rest of the college kids are going to be talking about this. So I went to a major university with major Division I sports. If those athletes went in that door, it would have gone around like wildfire on a campus of 20,000, students as well as teachers and fans. So it becomes really stigmatized, and as athletes, unfortunately, that prevents actually the help that is needed. So some signs and symptoms, we say, okay, what could be some common things to look at? We talked about trauma, and that's really important. As you can see from Betsy's app, she does a great job identifying, signs of trauma. And, I have to mention, as a practitioner of mental health, using these apps, using, technology, I think is critically important, not only to maintain gains in sessions, but out of session, especially when, we're trying to work on issues. So trauma, as we see in the app, is well detailed. Signs of depression. So, just give you a few, heads up about what is depression. As Betsy outlines, it's just feeling blue, being a normal, experience. But when it's persistent for several weeks, sometimes even 6, months or more, you've got a state of depression it's hard to move out of. So depression looks like having little interest or pleasure in doing things, feeling, down or hopeless, trouble with sleeplessness, having, enough energy, may affect your appetite or overeating as a result. It may affect how you feel about yourself, feeling bad about yourself, you're a failure, you've let down yourself, your community, your sport, and you may also be moving slower than usual, or sometimes even faster than usual, and this is really critical. And the big one, obviously, is you have thoughts of doing harm to yourself or killing yourself. That's an absolute time to seek professional help. Another sign and symptom is anxiety. So, it's a mental disorder, feelings of worry and fear that interfere with one's daily schedule. And so when we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about, feelings of nervousness, anxiousness, or an edge, inability to stop, control worrying, or worrying about too many different things, difficulties relaxing, and sometimes being so, restless it's hard to sit still, easily annoyed or irritable, and really, and also being afraid if something awful might happen. These are definitely times to go seek professional help, professional support, with a trained person who knows how to manage, getting through these kind of signs and symptoms. Let's see. There we go. So, so we'll talk about what does this help look like, and definitely Betsy and I, will be introducing this. And so for help, someone like myself, a mental health professional, having conversation with someone who's trusted, that trust is something that's done confidentially. We're going to keep everything private. So in this world of HIPAA, like when you're talking with your medical professional, maybe your athletic trainers, this is professional, confidential material. Your right of privacy is crucial. The first tenet of any mental health professional is to keep their patient-client privilege private. That help also is something you can find within your organization, within your community. Definitely if you're part of a professional organization, be talking to those people about someone you can talk to. It might be intimidating, but it could be the difference, in terms of improving how you feel. Also, if you're on campus, seeing where the help can be found. That help can be a range of different, time frames. Sometimes it can be a few sessions, a few months. Other times you need more help, especially if we're talking about longer lasting depression, anxiety, other traumas, other mental health diagnoses, where, there might be a number of different options to stabilize the state that you need to be in for optimal mental health. It is important to be upfront and honest. Again, we're talking about confidentiality. So these are times to say, I've got to try to figure a way to trust this professional. I realize sometimes it's, we want to try on a different person to make sure that person's right for us. But truly, when we found that professional, that's a time to have these good conversations, to try to get out what's going on inside of us, to live, our best life. And also, it's important to be patient with yourself. I know as athletes, you're used to fixing yourselves, getting out there, making something work. We want to take this magic pill. Truth is, when you're doing mental health work, it's a process, it's a journey. And that can be the most frustrating piece. But if you do it right, you get through the end, now you have long-lasting, impacting, solutions that you can work with, coping skills, as we talk about in the fields. And that is really important. And that's what you really want, is something to work with that you have throughout your whole life. So we do this intimate work as clinicians. And then, again, I've seen through the embracing of technology what, we can do, so making, these appointments, they're scheduled, continuing with them, trying not to miss them unless you have a real, medical emergency is the best thing you can do. You can get back on your field of play, you can get back in life. When you're transitioning from your field of play to, moving on to after that, definitely it's crucial to have somebody to bounce the stuff off of. So it's really important. And again, using technology as a way to bridge the gap between what you have intensely in session as well as you can continue on for life. So it's a great screen. I can see Betsy.
Geoff, you and I also talked about, when we looked at determining who will help the mental health professionals, is that a number of professional sporting associations have now instituted where they have to have a mental health clinician accessible to their athletes, and how important that is. And that we also talked about how even through COVID, that we've now opened up all these doors of telehealth and ways that athletes can avoid the fear of being seen, because they now can do telehealth.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point, Betsy. And, we, as a field, in the field of, of mental health, and I'm a trained social worker, we're trained to go work with people. Most of that had been face-to-face. Well, when we went to this time of social distancing, as all medical practice has gone at one point, the last 3 months, we've done solely telehealth. And telehealth is a way, I think, actually, it's made it easier to access proper support. As technology can do from a phone app, technology can do to bring mental health to you. You know, you don't have to go drive across the city or drive across a few different towns. Right now, with my practice, we get to email an address and turn the switch on, and boom, we have a session. And those sessions can be 45 minutes, sometimes they're an hour, and sometimes they're check-ins that are 20 to 30 minutes. So it's really important, and I find it to be extremely more valuable than any time in the past, that we can get to people and get what they need. And so I look at this, and I think how the professional organizations have looked at this, and they start to adopt it, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL has done this for a while, for example, where, you know, you can be traveling and you can still check in with your mental health professional. Here we are, you know, as panelists, and we're, you know, throughout the country, even, you know, across, you know, the world. So connecting isn't as difficult as it used to be to get help. Really important.
I know, for example, people can go through the app and email you and make an appointment, and in theory, potentially have a televisit through their phone. So that's just one way of being able to provide resources, putting mental health resources in people's hands where they can directly connect to a therapist to support them where they are in the privacy of their home, of their car, or if they're traveling for their sport, in a hotel room. So lots of resources that we have gotten to, and hopefully breaking down some barriers and some walls through COVID, and utilizing telehealth. So now, as I said in the beginning, is that we're going to close out the presentation on the mental health portion, on the overall mental well-being, by me circling back around to strategies, techniques, and resources. So I know we talked about the mental skills and techniques from a sport performance ideology. Now I'd like to talk about overall strategies and techniques, mental health strategies and techniques that help support us just in general, just in being who we are. And that all of these techniques together help us to create and be the best versions of who we can be. So some of those strategies and techniques that you will actually, that are embedded inside the app, are breathing techniques, meditation, aggression de-escalation, which after I found that the #1 clicked on sign was aggression, I decided that I needed to put Dr. Conti in there, who does aggression de-escalation training through YouTube. So he's in there. There's mindfulness training, there's yoga, there's peaceful sleep routines. And I think one really important aspect is your identity outside of sport. All of these strategies, techniques build upon one another to give you an overall mental well-being from an athletic perspective. How that translates directly to the app is that we have mental health strategies embedded inside the app. I wanted to highlight here Headspace, because I know within the last few days, Athlete Soul has actually partnered with Headspace. And so within the app, both two different places inside the app, you can log on and link to your Headspace account. Another important piece is that embedded inside the app are support structures for that specific community. So this is the Athlete Soul community, because this is the Athlete Soul branded app. And so when you go on, these are some of the people that you can connect with directly through the app. So now, as promised, I'm going to talk to you guys specifically about what the Athlete Mental Health Link app provides for you. It can provide for your athletes, for your coaches, for your teams, for your organization. It's basically putting mental health tools in the palm of your athlete's hands. So what you just need to do is scan the QR code and download it on the platforms. Create an account. This is what your create account screen will look like. And if you'd like to utilize the version that we have highlighted throughout the app, and which we will further in the next slide talk about, this is the Athlete Soul version. But if you're not affiliated with Athlete Soul and you just want to have the app to utilize, there is always the free version. All you need to do is do not utilize the association code. And what you see on the right-hand side of your screen is the free version. But there are definite benefits to having a branded version. So this is what the branded versions provide. There's institutional branding logos. So for Athlete Soul, who I partner with, this is their logo. Here are stats. As you've heard Geoff and I talk, we try to utilize stats and what's going on within the research community whenever we can. Everything we do is based on research and data. As we've already pointed out in the app, just previous to this, are links to meditation, mindfulness, aggression de-escalation, and many other strategies that can help you and support you. This is a specific dashboard button that we call 2 Athletes for Athletes. They're athlete-driven support structures. There's actually not a lot of free support structures for athletes, but that leads me to let you know that this app is edited all the time. I'm always looking for and vetting what would be good additions to the app. What is truly going to support our athletes in different levels. Within this app and within this dashboard button, you have specific resources for high school sports, college, and professional and elite athletes. This is a really important mental health resources dashboard button. There is over 20 national hotlines and resources that are one click away. The National Suicide Hotline is the #1 button on here. Right behind that is the text hotline. Then it is full of LGBTQ support systems. If you're having eating disorder issues, that's in here. Just multitude of multiple issues that our athletes struggle with, that they can go in the privacy and confidentiality of their own home, of wherever they are, and ask and seek for resources to help and support them. We've already shown examples of common signs and symptoms embedded in the app. And here is the institutional support systems, like the picture of what I showed you in the previous slide. And that is absolutely, these are as many organizational contacts as you want or as you need for your athletes to utilize in order to make contact. It's emails, it's phone numbers. And if you have a way of making perhaps online through Google Docs appointments, we can embed that in here as well, all from the phone of your athlete. At the bottom is what we call the asset banner. This is if you have a donor or corporate sponsor, and let's say, for example, Athlete Soul is now partnered with Headspace. Perhaps they'd like me to put the Headspace logo in here, so that way when the app comes up immediately, all of their clients and all of their athletes just can click on the bottom of it and get directly linked to Headspace. All of this is accessible in the app, and that's the advantage to having the branded versions. This is our conclusion of our portion of the presentation. This is both mine and Geoff's contact information. I am educational, I'm the app, I do programming, I do policies and procedures. I am not clinical. Geoff is clinical, as well as he does consulting and comes in and does clinical expertise for even teams as a whole. So this is your way that you guys can contact us. If there's anything that we can do or provide for you, we would be honored and love to help you guys in any way that we can. So this is the conclusion of our portion, Miriam. I will go ahead and stopping the share so that if there is any sorts of questions in the chat or that you've been asked, we can bring those forward and talk about it.
Absolutely, and thank you, Betsy and Geoff, for this great presentation. You know, we've had the app available for a while, and I think it's a fantastic tool. We're not using it to the best we can yet, but I can see so much potential both for us and a lot of other organizations. So I actually wanted to start with a question related to the app because that's what you finished on. I sort of know the answer, but I want to highlight it again. You know, this is basically a white label evergreen application that any type of sporting institution can have, right, or purchase. So can you tell us a little bit how that works? If I am an AD for a university, how do I get in touch with you and how do I set this up for my school?
Great question. I appreciate you asking it. So what they would do is they would email me or they can call me or text me. And what we do is we have an honest conversation about the size of their institutional and organization that they're looking at. We talk about what kind of information that they want in there. As I said, we're always editing the app, always trying to bring current and useful information to it. I am currently adding a notification possibility. So for those that I've already partnered with, you can literally send out a notification to your users or to, in this case, your athletes and say, you know what, we're going to host therapy dogs in the quad on next Wednesday. Please come and utilize them. So that can be embedded in there. Any sort of information that they want in there, a know-how. What is their protocol? What is their emergency protocol for their athletes if they're at home, if they're on campus, if they're away performing, or at an athletic competition or a tournament. So all of this information is embedded, but all of that has to be given and disseminated from them to me, and it takes about 7 days in order to put all of that information together. But I can do a preview in about 24 hours, and they can see it in their logos with a few sample contacts in there.
Yeah, and I want to highlight that this application really has multiple aspects to it, because you can do the education portion, basically the prevention, making sure that we deal with the mental wellness, the overall person. You can, there is a crisis prevention section that has all the numbers that you can reach, as well as the education for the coaches and the athletes. I mean, the description of signs and symptoms I find very useful, not just for the athletes, but also really for the coaches who may not have had enough training in that space, especially when we're dealing with COVID and the coach is the main point of contact when it comes to mental health. I think it's super useful. So I mean, I can't reiterate enough how great the tool is, and especially for school or organization that do not have the funding to have someone on staff full time, or maybe have chosen to do the sport performance, right? The above the line type of support and want to outsource the clinical part. I think it's really interesting. And I really appreciate that you guys separated the two, because I think it's really important to understand, you know, what are the pathologies, what is the process for clinical things, for illnesses that are being diagnosed versus, you know, your mental game. So that was fantastic. I'm looking here to see if any of our participants have questions for you guys. We had a great comment on this is a great presentation. I want to switch a little bit, I guess, to you, Geoff. You were talking a little bit about trauma in the presentation, and there is a portion of trauma that is related to your personal life or your childhood that you may carry on. But there is also sometimes trauma that relates to your sport, or a portion of emotional abuse. And I wanted to ask you if you can touch on this a little bit, because sadly in recent years we've heard a lot about it, and so I think it'll be interesting to hear on that, and perhaps the consequences as well.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to in certain sports where there's been, yeah, right, those abuses have been pretty horrific, and long lasting and unchecked. And those long-lasting abuses. I mean, I'm here in Massachusetts, where a few of those athletes, and especially one sport I'm thinking of, are in my neck of the woods here. Bravely came out. Look, we want coaches to be supporting us and pushing us to some extent, but doing it safely. We want our performance to be at our peak. But we want to make sure that if something isn't right, something doesn't feel right, it's not safe, that athletes, just like anybody else, feel comfortable to talk out about that. And in this day and age, that's critically important. If something isn't right, say something. Because absolutely some horrific things that have happened, athletes, like anybody, have to talk to somebody to try to unpack this, to try to make sure none of this is seen as their fault. That they haven't failed in disclosing this, in trying to manage their own, safeties. So yeah, trauma takes on a lot of factors, both from a family standpoint as well as the sport itself. And even aside from the horrific stuff that's going on, there are events that have happened for athletes just, in the midst of their careers, where again, they may have had, an injury, and they're now worried about how they feel the play is going to look like. And so, that's it's performance anxiety, but we almost have to, again, do that sort of retraining of ourselves, that behavioral training, get back and do those patterns of what worked, but we may have to do things differently, because our abilities may be just different on some level to perform. But what that does, and how that compromises our thought of ourselves as superior athletes, as superior beings, is definitely something that can undermine our mental health and our attitudes, even in general, even our self-esteem just as a person. So trauma, I see in a lot of different aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting that you highlighted the trauma, the anxiety and depression. I think there's been a lot of research that is shown after the fact that a lot of athletes are going through depression at some stage in their career. And often it goes undiagnosed. I think generally athletes have an issue recognizing that they're going through depression. It's related to their career as an athlete, right? Your strength is to suppress your emotion and your feeling, and not let that distract your career. And you also have trouble discerning between burnout and other type of symptoms. Do you have some recommendation for both athletes and coaches on when is it time to consult? Like when do you need to seek help?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. This transition from being superior athlete, or having this identity that's been on you for 15, 20, 30, I mean, this sports, it can be 40 years and more, and then you stop. So what you do need, this is like any transition. I look at your sport similar to people who are in the military and then stop being in the military. What is life as a civilian like? So what is life as a non-athlete like? We do need some transitioning. We need some support. Sometimes it can be friends and people who understand. And sometimes when it's so debilitating, where we do find ourselves depressed, as I was talking about with those symptoms, or anxious. What's going to happen next? We talk about athletes where in certain sports you have to eat a certain way, you're exercising a certain way. And let's say you eat a high-calorie diet, you're used to that because that's what you need in your sport. Well, when you stop being in that sport, if you keep eating that high-calorie diet, you're going to watch your body mass increase, and it's going to affect the way you feel. It's going to affect that you're able to do things physically like you were. So we have to adapt to what it means post-life. So coaches, I would hope, and this is probably a difficult point. Coaches are worried and focused about that person in that sport, but if they're being at their best and being as responsible as possible, they're also educating athletes at whatever level that they're looking at what's next. You've done a great job at this level. This is what it means to succeed in life, to be able to get the knowledge you need, to get the support nutritionally that you need. You can still exercise, and that, it's not looked at as a failure. It's looked at as just another stage of life. And that way it's a normative, meaning it's expected stage, rather than, this is a failure because we're not now competing at that level. This is just something that athletes go through, so I think it's really normalizing what being in your sport, and then being, retiring from your sport, what that can look like. And success happens all the time with non-athletes, because non-athletes are so competitive. That's a really great adaptive skill for the next life, stage of life. So yeah, absolutely, Miriam.
Great, thank you. We don't have any additional question for this morning. Is there anything that the two of you want to add or share with the group here?
No, we just appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you. As the research says, I think the most important thing to jumping off is education, is educating both our coaches and our athletes. That's actually one of the biggest issues, is the fact that they are not in sync with one another. When I do my seminars, I say they are not on the same page of the playbook. So it is important that both athletes and coaches hear the same information, so that way they can talk to one another about it and understand that what they're saying is being heard and understood. That's kind of my big thing, is that my big push is always going to be to educate, educate, educate.
And if I could add to that, Miriam, I think in the field of mental health, when it comes to athletes and coaches, it's creating a safe environment. It's not creating judgment, for athletes to come out and say, hey, I need some help. Again, we look at it like a physical injury, we know we'd get help. But in mental health, even though we become more open, there's still a stigma. So we have to encourage every sport, every, coach to say, good job, great job, you're attending to yourself. That'll make you a stronger person, both when, in your sport when you're in it, as well as just in life. So, it's just creating that open atmosphere and communicating in a non-judgmental way. That's going to be critical to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. You need the whole team and staff on board on the same page to be able to be efficient and support everybody. Thank you, boss, for your time presenting on the topic, presenting on the app. We're going to be sharing the recording of this presentation as well as your contact information. So anybody who wants to set up the app or wants to connect with you guys and learn more, they can do so. Much appreciated. Hope to do it again. And I wish you all a very good week. Thank you again.
Thanks, Miriam.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye all. Thank you.